Okay, I want to say thank you all to attending our International Women's Day celebrating women in revenue. By way of introduction, just to clarify who SALT are, we are a digital recruitment agency focused on recruiting sales, marketing, tech, and creative experience people. We work with anywhere from Series A startups to Fortune 500 companies. And I oversee our go-to-market practice here in North America. My name is Elizabeth. I've been in the recruitment industry for 10 years, and the one common theme that I get asked by clients all the time is, how do I hire more diverse talent and women in leadership positions? So definitely it's a big passion of mine, and really appreciate you all being here today to open up this platform to talk about International Women's Day.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. I'm Alice. I work with Elizabeth on the go-to-market recruitment team here at SALT New York. I'm another Brit based in Brooklyn. I focus on recruiting B2B marketers across all levels and verticals within revenue organizations. And as we've just mentioned, diversity and how we work with women and people of all backgrounds is super important to us, and how we can focus on that going forward and increasing that in our society. So as Elizabeth said, we are so delighted to welcome you all today to celebrate women in revenue, the career and life challenges, triumphs and lessons learned. So thank you for being with us.
And just to introduce yourselves, I'd love to kind of start with a personal journey and hear from each of you. So tell us kind of about, how did you get to where you are today? And Jeminah, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you so much, Elizabeth and Alice, for having us today. I'm really, really honored to be here with such a strong group of women representing revenue. I think that this is the type of forum that I've always looked for in terms of finding like-minded women who love getting things done and making businesses grow while maintaining their voice as feminine leaders in the workspace. So thank you so much for having us here and for including me in that. As for myself and my journey, I really love this question because it's nice to reflect back to 18 years ago when I first fell in love with revenue management in the brick and mortar space of hotels. I spent about 8 years collectively in the tourism and hospitality industry and wore a lot of different hats, including sales and marketing and ownership of the APAC and EMEA international markets as well. Through that, what I found was that at the time, starting in that career, it was 2006. So at the time, automation was really structured around channel management and automating rate strategy. So I was able to see firsthand the impact that technology had to a brick and mortar industry. And before I knew it, I was working for the technology, working at scale with partners to bring that technology into their own brick and mortar operations so that they could grow their revenues as well. How I came here today, I'd say, from there, I transitioned to beauty and wellness tech. I had a little transition period in editing to fulfill my inner journalist. And I'd say the number one piece that kept me motivated was being attached to the greater industry mission. So for 8 years of travel, hospitality, and tourism, I was very much so inspired by the mission of the industry to drive world peace through bridging cultures. And being Canadian Taiwanese myself, I always found that my home and my household was always a room of bridging cultures. And so that was something that really motivated me to give back to the world through a career and feel very fulfilled by it. When I moved into beauty and wellness tech, I found a lot of connection with the idea of bringing technology to businesses that were helping people be able to express their most best selves and feel beautiful every day, and really observe in our day-to-day how often we're investing in these different self-care options, and how the consumer experience, the journey is so important, and to be part of that movement was very, very special for me. So through that, it inspired me to do things like take risks, big risks, moving countries, moving cities and moving departments, and speaking up for myself when I needed to really make sure that I was sharing my voice within those journeys and contributing everything that I had to offer to the table.
Thank you, Jeminah. Appreciate that. And then I'm just going to go around the screen as how I can see people. Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, a bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for having us. I'm Stephanie Reustle. I'm a sales leader in the advertising sector, ad tech. And how I've gotten to where I am today, I've always been fascinated by digital media and the digital landscape. I actually began my career in print, working for some titles such as Real Simple and Marie Claire in the marketing department and sales side. And in these roles, I was always witnessing such powerful women who were the face of the brand and had the opportunity to evangelize what we were doing in front of amazing marketers. And I was very inspired to be the one that was front and center evangelizing what we were doing behind the scenes. So in 2013, I took a big risk at the time by pivoting to a startup in the video ad network space, which is where I still am today. And 10 years later, this role has really given me the opportunity to be front and center with all of the innovation that's going on in the advertising sector between connected TV and AI and a cookieless identification future. And I've been able to move up within my organization, now running a team of people management or people managers, individual contributors, and partnering with all of the major holding companies in the advertising space to evangelize what we're doing. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. And question to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you all. I am a marketer. My most recent role was the Chief Marketing Officer at the Arena Group. How I got here today, I always really had a love for journalism and for books and media. So really my first job out of college was actually a marketing assistant at HarperCollins Publishers, where I got thrown into the mix. So learned about the consumer side and the sales side. And then like Stephanie, throughout my career, I just kind of moved from really one print magazine to the next, or one company to the next, and learned all about consumer marketing. I found that I really, really loved that space. And then over the years, as things moved to digital, I took on more and more of the digital side of that marketing piece. So I actually left Bloomberg. I also took kind of a big risk. I was at Bloomberg for a few years where I learned a ton and really loved it. But there was an opportunity to work for this great woman at the street who hired me to come in and help really revamp their entire consumer subscription business, which we did. And as I was there, kind of building it, I just took on more and more responsibility for all pieces of the business, all of the consumer revenue. And then after 3 years, we were purchased by the Arena Group, which also licensed Sports Illustrated. And, my background just kind of fit to be that evangelist for the consumer at this new company. So we were there about 3 years and took it public. I would say that all the different roles that I've had, I have pushed pretty hard for myself to get. And so it was really interesting taking over as the Chief Marketing Officer of this company that now I think has 600 people. You really, I think, have to kind of lean in and evangelize for yourself to get there. So that's how I have gotten where I am today.
Thank you. And Shilpa, same question to you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you did today.
Thank you. First and foremost, thanks again for bringing us all together here. I think I echo some of the sentiments shared here. I think we need to do more of this, and it's an absolute privilege to share space with all of you lovely ladies here. Now, coming back to me, believe it or not, I actually was on my way to become or pursue journalism, and I somehow landed my feet in financial services. So I was born and raised in a city called Bombay in India, and I've lived since in different countries across the globe. But basically, I ended up landing my feet in financial services. And when I did, the sheer expanse of the industry and the global economic impact it drove in a highly competitive and volatile market is what I found to be extremely fascinating. So after my MBA, I started my career in banking, in capital markets, sales and trading, and I slowly pivoted into tech, where I've spent over 25 plus years of my career in various sets of experiences, from building a product from its early inception stages, scaling a business into a new geography, and equally driving a lot of change management and transformation. In all to say that, in a sense, and I think this really comes from my formative, upbringing, is I consider myself to be a builder. I love to build with purpose, and with building, I have to say I'm very comfortable with everything that it entails. The highs and the lows, the ambiguity, getting into grassroots levels, learning and solving complex problems, and that's really what keeps me going as a commercial leader. And currently, I am working for one of the largest fintechs, where I literally wake up every day feeling so energized and grateful for the opportunity, but equally, with the people that I work with. So that's about me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Shilpa, and thanks for being here. And Kirti, we would also love to hear from you.
Okay, excited to be here. I love the eclectic background of women that have gathered here, and I agree. I think it's actually exciting. We don't all mimic one another either, and we can really learn from each other. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I might be dating myself here. I have now 24 years of experience as a professional marketer. I have had the opportunity to work across multiple sectors. I was supposed to be a doctor like every good little Indian girl, but I decided not to be one. And my parents thought I was going to be a secretary, but I, have proven otherwise, and really entered the world of marketing right out of college. So I started out in the entertainment industry. And much like I think a few of you have also mentioned, I was really drawn to building things and changing and transforming. And so even when I entered the entertainment world, there was something that they didn't have called a website to support their business. Can you believe? I mean, I'm really showing my age right now. But so I had to educate them on this idea of we need a website. So there's a digital commerce center for people to come and learn about us. And I really took kind of that experience and jumped over into manufacturing industry, really drawn to this idea of the B2B to C market. How does it work? How do we use different, communication tools to create engagement? And something you're going to see as a theme throughout my career journey is I love taking calculated risks. When you felt like you've hit a threshold or you can't learn something new, instead of waiting for that opportunity to kind of knock on my door, I really just kind of took the bull by its horns, so to speak. And I was like, I'm going to go find something else. And that's really my foray then into the financial services industry. So I've been, of the 24 years now, 18 years in financial services. And the reason if you look at my background, I've jumped from consumer banking to asset management, institutional to wealth management. And as of late, I've been really entrenched in the fintech world, and specifically also blockchain. I love challenging myself to take something really complex and demystify it and make it easier for people to consume. And so I would say what I try to do with even mentors I work with is challenge yourself. I think that's the big thing we need to do, regardless of being a man or a woman. If you want to grow in your career, you have to be able to challenge yourself, and don't be set in ways that are comfortable, because to me, comfort means stagnance. And that's sort of like the motto that I've applied to not only growing in my career and getting to a place where I'm excited and thrilled to work within, but also to really figure out how to create a positive impact on whatever society, community, or product that I'm trying to drive in the marketplace. Today, as of actually 2 days ago, I was appointed as global CMO of a SPAC that's undergoing a de-SPAC process right now. And I've spent predominantly my financial services career making the wealthy wealthier. And I'm excited with this new venture. It's going to be about providing democratized access to different aspects of financial solutions so that we could truly serve the underbanked and underserved. And so that is my journey in a nutshell.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. And Kirti, you touched on it there in terms of challenging yourself and the challenges that we all face in our careers. I would love to get your perspectives on how working for revenue organizations that are driven by profit, you have experienced challenges in your career, and specifically as you are leaders in what you do, you've been, you have experience, you understand how to manage teams and how to get to that next stage of your career. We would love to understand how you made that step from, let's say, the middle of the company to the top and where you are today. And I'd love to start with you, Jill.
Sure, that's a really great question. I think the way that I personally stepped up was that I found people who I worked for who gifted me with more and more responsibility and more confidence, and actually encouraged me to, climb the ladder more and more. And then what actually happened is that when my old boss exited my company, when it was sold, there was a place there for someone to step into her role. And I was very privileged that she, went and I think spoke up for me, and that's how I got my role. So I do feel like those relationships where you have positive interactions with people who can help you along the way has been the best way for me to move up, and also taking on more, like some of you have said, you just can't be afraid to just say, I can do this, and learn it kind of as you go, and just do it. So I think those two things are really what helped me quite a bit.
Absolutely. Having that advocate, that person who advocates for you.
I think you touched upon something really important, is relationship building and management. We can't do and accomplish anything or prove ROI without really having people a part of your journey, right? Whether it's even at a mid-management level, a junior level, you need to have allies along the way, and you create authentic relationships that allows you to then flourish, right? And prove your value along that journey. So I completely agree with you on relationships.
Yeah, and it's not just one person either. Like throughout the journey of your career, sometimes you're blessed with people who come in your life that either make you see things a different way or be a better version of yourself, or you watch and learn. And that to me has been so important in my journey, in my career, certainly. Absolutely.
Wonderful. And Jeminah?
Yes, I think definitely agree on the allyship component. And I would say that those allies, they intersect within your workspace, your career, and the people that you meet professionally. And also that goes into your personal life. I look at, my family, and as well as my, outside of work friends, and getting that honest, unbiased, well, kind of biased, actually, probably the more biased opinion, but people that really deeply know you, that have been hearing you talk about your dreams and your desires for a very long time, and allowing them to be a sounding board for before you take leaps and before you take risks can be extremely beneficial. So you can get multiple feedback points from professionals that know you from that angle, as well as the people who know you at an intimate personal level, and can also be there to support you along the way. And in terms of my advice to anyone in a position that they find is more of a middle kind of point within their career and they want to grow in the ladder, one thing that I would say when I look back on my career, a lot of the training and a lot of the certifications that I took were directly related to hard skills for my current role. And a lot of them were horizontal. I've taken comedy classes. I've taken, coaching practice certifications, as well as yoga, because those were fundamentals that I felt would help me show up as a better person in whatever position or ladder movement I fall into. So I would say invest in yourself for technical and hard skills, and invest in yourself in horizontal soft skills as well. And then taking it back to initially what I started talking about at the beginning of this session in terms of taking risks and speaking up. I think there has been many opportunities where opportunities have been presented to me, and my initial reaction is to say, that's okay, I don't need that. I don't need the extra responsibility. I'm happy with where I am. But then through those mentorship conversations, as well as those allyships, personally and professionally, being able to decide, okay, I can do this because I have the support network and I believe in myself that I'll be able to take this risk and love it and thrive. And then speaking up, not being afraid to speak up to your leaders in terms of what you want to do and where you want to go, so that you can develop those very specific and clear relationships to give you direction as to what skills you may need to iron out, or what maybe you could do to stand out in a crowd. And speak up with your family, right? I think, as someone who's lived in the US for a few years for my career, that was a conversation I had to have with my family. Would they be willing to relocate? And not being afraid to ask. And the response was surprising to me. It was an inanimate yes, let's do this, go ahead. And sometimes we build up in our heads what we think we're going to get as an objection, but really it's just about communicating our wants and our desires.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that communication piece is so key, and that perhaps the imbalance between men and women in the workplace can seep into our personal lives as well. Mm-hmm. Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so advice I would give someone in middle management looking to maybe take the next step would be making very cognizant decisions each and every day to surround yourself with people that truly energize you and bring you up. I think we all can, relate to coming home from a day where we're feeling really up and buzzing to who we met with and who we, brainstormed with, versus the people that really take energy away. So I think being very deliberate about that, especially in the workplace, like we're in a really tough economy. We're all dealing with the ups and downs, and it's really important to just surround yourself with people that can keep you in that positive perspective, especially as you move into leadership. I would say, as Jeminah said, it's really important to know who your advocates are internally and who will make this decision for you with your advancement. We all know these decisions are made without us being in the room. What will they say? How will they position us? And what can we do to best make it as easy as possible for them to advocate for us? So what I found successful is working with that person to develop a plan, get their buy-in, hear from them on what you need to do to make their life easier, put that plan together in writing with metrics and timelines, put time on the calendar to make sure that you are delivering and you do it, and you need to do it consistently, and you need to be accountable for yourself. And it really is, it's not harder than that if you can get the buy-in in terms of what you need to do. So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you. Perfect. And finally, Shilpa.
I think from a foundational standpoint, I'm really grateful to my mom. She is a very progressive woman, very ahead of her time. So as a foundation, that really helped me as I started my career in a rather, at the time when I did, was very dominated by a certain gender, right? So, to get my foot in there and to be able to do the things I did, I think that foundation that I had really helped. And having said that, there were challenges, and when I mean by challenges, I meant more about it was my own ability to speak up. Many a times as coming in and as an immigrant, somebody who doesn't belong to a particular country, you're often conditioned or told to put your head down and let your work speak to yourself. While I do believe that is true, and that is a part of who I am, I think standing up and speaking up for what is right, even when it's uncomfortable, is something that I've learned over the years. And I think a lot of you women here have echoed that. It's really challenging that status quo. And I not only do that for myself, but even as I have my mentees with my team, it's always about, not just taking things for what they are. And that's where, this whole point about the act of radical candor is so important, is to be able to be unabashed in, while still having the respect and reverence to the other point of view. You really need to have a vision of life beyond your world and, have the same respect in the way other people have, view the world. So that's really more about how I have navigated, the 2.5 decades of me working here. And I know, there was a question around what are some of my own, some of the feedback that I would give to somebody who's in leadership or aspiring to be. And I think one of you did mention, I truly believe there are times when you get a time where you choose to lead, and there are times when the time chooses you. And in both cases, we must be ready, right? And that's where I say, fear and courage go together. You have to be bold to take risk. And if you don't know, build a community around you, learn, ask, and work every single day, on improving yourself. And do the most difficult thing that comes your way, that challenges you. I know it was who, I think mentioned here, I think it was Kirti you mentioned, right? I mean, the fact that you're now going on to become a CMO of a blockchain. So many of us have our own preconceived notions around it, right? The world has its own preconceived notions around that. So, for you to take on a role with an aim to demystify that while you're learning that yourself is very courageous, right? So I think we need more of that, and we need to have mentors that we can emulate and move that forward.
Thank you. It's nice to hear from all of you, and it's always good to have diverse perspectives as well, considering that you're each from different industry verticals, but also there's some commonalities here, right, in the advice that we can offer. I do want to transition somewhat to another topic that I think is, of course, also very important, is work-life balance, and how parenthood can impact women in the workplace. Stephanie, I know this is something that you and I touched on, so if there's anything you want to kind of share in terms of personal experience or your thoughts on this, that would be great.
Sure. So I have an almost 2-year-old, and I remember when I was leading up for maternity leave, I was like, this is going to be amazing. I am going to garden while he naps and cook the new recipes. And I was completely thrown for a loop in terms of how my life changed in an amazing way. And obviously there were some difficult times in terms of that transition and being so career focused and being able to dedicate all of my time to my role and going through that shift. So I think that parenthood tremendously impacts women in the workplace. And I think we could all agree, like for those of us who are parents, that it's, you want to do it all, but you can't. And maybe we're accustomed to being able to do it all, but there are trade-offs for everything. And I just think it's really important to kind of have more awareness and education to the difficulties that women and caretakers go through as they embark on that journey, because it definitely is, you know, there's a mental load that's real, and it's what makes us like so amazing in our roles, being able to balance it all, but it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some might say that the inequity that women experience at work is due to either an expectation of parenthood and how that shapes people's perceptions of them, or lived experiences of parenthood and whatever that might bring and how that might affect experiences of the workplace. And I would love, and feel free to jump in, I would love to get your perspective as a collective on what you can do well in managing new parents. What can you do to support new parents? What isn't being done in large, small, medium-sized revenue organizations where perhaps a new parent's priorities might not be aligned with profit before everything? You know, how would you advise people who might be listening and considering the same challenges?
Well, I would love to jump in on this topic. It's really kind of precious for me. I mean, today I have a 14-year-old, but I assure you 14 years ago when I had her, I was doing my MBA program full-time. I was working full-time at Citibank, and I chose to do that because it was when the banks were taking government funding and you didn't want to come out of business school without a job, God forbid. And I ended up getting pregnant by surprise. And I'm so great at planning these things, clearly. And what I will say is been a positive shift in the workplace from my perspective, as I've grown from, you know, a junior associate to manager, then really an executive leader the last several years, is when I was early on and I had my daughter, I almost pretended like I didn't have a kid at work because I didn't want to be perceived as she's not going to get anything done because now she's a mom. And it was, I kept it very compartmentalized because I wanted to still prove that I could still work all the hours, I could still do everything, I could still be on top of all the work we have to get done. And I would not even really talk about my daughter too much. And this is where it really matters who you choose to work with and for, and company culture, because I then had the opportunity after I had her to be shifted under a different executive at Citibank. And she was actually exceptionally supportive. And she was like, you have a laptop. You could work from anywhere. You do not have to haul your butt here to Long Island City and sit on 2 different subways to get here. Just do it when you can. As long as like you deliver, that's all that matters. And I think having that mentorship, guidance, and support really informed my subsequent years, not only for myself, but in how I kind of looked after the people that worked in my team, as well as my partners across the board. And this idea of empathy and understanding and compassion is so critical. And if the companies or the managers who don't have this, I think will not have long-term quality, highly productive people working for them. And the reality is when we have kids, it's not just about the woman who had the kid. We also need to be empathetic towards the dads. Like they should be allowed to leave and go home and help and do the things that they want to. And I will say, my observation is that culturally in the labor market and just working across different companies the last like 10 years, I think it's shifted for the positive. I think it needs to continue shifting that way. I feel the pandemic, as bad as it was, it actually forced companies to just let people balance their lives in a unique way, unlike, prior to the pandemic. Unfortunately, we all know there are big banks and institutions trying to force people to come back into the office. And in fact, even in the new company I've joined, we've talked about balancing company culture because we don't think you should have to be inside the office if you have 2 kids at home or a baby or whatever. Why are you wasting time 3 hours on the train when that time could be used in a much more meaningful way, whether it's taking care of your kid and then getting right on your computer to work? Now, obviously, this depends on your function and what industry you work in. So we have to be cognizant of that. But I do think that we need to really step back, and we can never be 100% at anything. That's my firm belief. I think I learned that the hard way, but I'm really okay being 80% good at all the things that matter. So that's my perspective on balancing life.
I echo with what's already been shared, so I'm not going to add more. I mean, I'm just going to add a few other things. I think what I've noticed is, I agree, the pandemic has clearly shifted our thinking around flexible work, which is really important, you know, because as long as the work's getting done, it shouldn't matter where it's being done from. So that's great. I have seen a lot of companies emulate that. But in addition to that, I think as leaders, is what you permit is what you promote. So you as a parent, if you are actually showing them that you could work flexibly, could be productive, then I think the folks who work with you are actually going to feel comfortable and not, you know, sometimes they really so hard on themselves, right? So I think it's very, very important to emulate that that level of transparency and communication within the team, or even as if you're a part of a company, just not for your immediate team, but equally if you're a part of any women's group or any of that within the company, the more you can get that message out, it'll resonate with a lot of parents. So that's number one. The other thing I've noticed is, you know, a lot of, you know, companies, big and small, all sizes, they have really good, you know, they have great policies, but I'm not sure how many are aware of that, right? So you may have a benefit that's accessible to you, but you may not be aware that that's there. So the more we can communicate things around that, I think it's so important, because I think a lot of times, especially as parents, we know, okay, how long am I going to be gone for paternity or maternity? But you perhaps don't know that there are some other resources available to you and are available at your disposal. So I think it's very much as HR, you know, you need to really communicate that and more often so that employees are aware of that. So that's another two things I would add to what Kirti just mentioned, but I totally echo with everything that's been shared so far.
Definitely. And from my standpoint, at least, I've actually worked with some really interesting tech startups this year, and one that stood out to me where they're really just encouraging people to have the opportunity to have children and start a family, where it was for a VP of sales role, and they were offering a large sum of funds essentially to go towards fertility treatment of any kind. So the person stepping into that role, you know, could take that on board, as well as having pretty progressive health benefits, I would say. So I do agree. I think in that sentiment, there is a change for the positive overall. Something else that I think Alice and I would like to know, being that we are recruiters and being that you're all leaders in your space, when looking to recruit and hire, you know, being that typically if we're thinking about specifically for getting women into leadership roles, you know, how do you feel is a good approach, or how do you hire for and then also retaining female talent? Jill, do you want to jump in with this one first?
Sure. I really, really believe that this is super important to do, and to get kind of diverse people on your team, not just for the world and for women, but I think it's also good for business, you know, to have different ideas coming through. And I've always kind of taken the point of view that you just do, like, don't hire people who, you know, a guy told me about this guy that worked with this guy. You know, there's a lot of that like internal networking that goes on in industries where you're only hiring people that people know. And I feel like that kind of insulates everybody. So I think you have to be super mindful that you need to maybe go to get the recruiter and do lots of different interesting things, bring in people that, you know, other people maybe don't know. And that gets you more diversity. And I think it's so important to do that. And a lot of industries that we've been talking about, you know, are, you know, changing in that way, I think. And I think that's really good.
Thank you. Jeminah, what about any experiences you've had?
Yeah, I think when I look back at all of the hiring experiences, one thing that I always teach my managers as well is to look for people who are demonstrating conscious competence in the skills that are needed for the job that we're hiring for. So while we want to have diversity and representation, we're not hiring just for diversity. We're hiring for the skills and for the capabilities to do the job well. And by doing that, I find that you end up coming with a more diverse pool, and that's diverse from a family background, from origin background, from gender, and that way we're really able to highlight and elevate and promote hopefully those people as time goes on. So that would be my advice to the hiring managers out there looking at growing diverse talent on an ongoing basis. Look at conscious competence versus potential. I think we talk a lot about potential, and to me, what is potential? Potential is someone who knows how to do the job that you're hiring for, but has energy and excitement and brings something new to the table and a new perspective, or fills a gap in a skill set that team doesn't have. Versus sometimes in new management or new hiring roles, I find a lot of new managers might attach potential to just the excitement and just the personality. And that can be a slippery slope to fall into when you have those energetic, wonderful people in the role of their dreams, but they really haven't done the job before and know really where to begin. And then the training and the onboarding takes a lot longer than expected.
Thank you. Kirti?
I would echo Jeminah's sentiment. I've never actually been one, when I've built my teams out, that, oh, I need a woman, I need, a certain race. I think it's just really wrong. And frankly, I wouldn't want to be hired for that reason, just because I'm a brown Indian woman. Like, that's ridiculous. I think it's really critical that we are first assessing talent for their fit based on the job that has to be done. And just like you articulated, it's just been through that very organic search approach that I've built, just by happenstance, like very diverse teams. And that's because I'm also not very narrow-minded in my hiring process in terms of, oh, you only have to have this experience, otherwise I will not look at these candidates, because then you'll end up with these kind of myopic thinkers, coming together in a very kind of just homogeneous fashion versus having diverse thinking. And so somebody gave me a chance, right? When I was in the entertainment industry, to enter consumer banking. And then even throughout the different facets of financial services, they're very strict, right? Like, oh, you don't have wealth management experience, we can't hire you. And it's ridiculous. Like I'm like the opposite of that. I'm like, this is interesting. They have the right aptitude, they have the potential. And then I try to match and see how they fit into the larger organization I'm building.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing. I think when we are hiring talent, I think we need to. It's very easy to go within our network and say who knows who, and you get a referral, and while that is also valuable, right? Because you trust somebody, and it's a trusted source. But it's really good to broaden that horizon, and I often do that. And in the time that I've been here, we talk a lot about D&I, right? And I think you see more of that happening. But I think it has to go beyond gender. There are some, I've worked with some really strong companies, where they only wanted to hire folks from Ivy Leagues schools. And while that's great, you need to go to, some different tier institutions and get great talent, to coming from there. Some preconceived notions about industry change, right? Like, why would you hire somebody from a certain industry pivoting into this industry? So there has to be more of a mindset shift in there. And I think the more you're leaning towards that, so as much as I'm more aligned to skills-based hiring, I think I'm leaning more equally around traits-based hiring, because I think traits are equally so important, because skills can be learned depending on where you are. But traits are very inherent to an individual, right? And how they may perform in a particular, under stress or whatever that may be. So I've been leaning so much in the past few years around hiring that's more traits-based as opposed to just simply being skills.
I completely agree with you, Shilpa. That's like that idea of like, what's their aptitude? Right. And you can always teach them if they have the aptitude.
Exactly.
to add on to that as well, just thinking back to the competence piece, right? I think the way I look at and the way I describe the conscious competence is being able to define the skill and be able to understand what's required, what steps are needed in order to achieve a given objective. Where the aptitude and the skill mastery comes in is where that unconscious competence, where somebody is doing the job with their eyes closed. And I feel like when you're at that stage, that's when you're at that place where it's an opportunity to challenge yourself, to go for that next role that's above maybe your previous range. And aligning with what you had said there, Shilpa, around looking for traits. The traits combined with the conscious competence, I feel, is where you can really find a perfect fit. And it's all trial and error, right? There's no perfect, I think, recipe for building the high-performing team. I think there's trial and error that comes with it. And a lot of the time, it takes a little bit of time to find the rhythm for building, especially a new team from the ground up, to determine what exactly those missing skills are and find what traits are needed to kind of create that perfect combination of success. Thanks for triggering that thought on that, Shilpa.
Thank you, Jeminah. That's it's fascinating. I feel we've touched on a few themes today. We talk about advocates, we talk about allies, we talk about taking risks, challenging yourself, and making sure that you're staying true to you. And I loved that thought as well about trait-based hiring. I think that's something which we do subconsciously, unconsciously, and it's good to lean into it. And as each of you are well-respected leaders in your various industries, one final thought would be around the embracing equity piece. This is the slogan of International Women's Day 2023. Are there any ways that you can think about embracing equity, material ways in the workplace, perhaps thinking about any groups or forums, committees or networks, paying it forward, as you guys have all mentioned has happened to you in the past? We would love to hear about any of those sorts of spaces that you've encountered in the last couple of years, perhaps, that have helped you on your way. And Stephanie, I'd love to begin with you.
Sure. So in my industry, She Runs It is a great organization which aggregates a lot of great content and mentorship programs. And I was lucky enough to participate in their mentor program, where I was connected with my current mentor, who's the president of NBC Universal. So through that organization, was able to find someone that I can lean on for an objective opinion. It's great to be able to go to my family and friends, but having someone who's in the industry has been invaluable. And also providing mentorship through, people that I have worked with historically in more of an organic fashion. I think paying it forward is so important, especially as a female, to be able to just continue to, show and teach what we've learned. I'd also recommend, like, in terms of, I guess the embracing equity, just being curious and open-minded in every single situation with every person that you encounter. You really don't know what anyone is going through, and we all have lives, outside of the professional realm. And I think that whether you're female or not, like, you have other things on your plate. So embracing equity, asking questions and just trying to be supportive, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. And Jill, what about you? Final words.
As far as organizations that have helped me, it's been great to be part of Chief and kind of get to know all these wonderful, amazing women. Of course, that is, for a certain level and up. But it's been incredible to see the work that all these awesome women are doing, and that you can actually have conversations where, you understand each other. So that's been great. And I also agree that, really, I lean a lot on my network, people that I have actually worked with and for and are friends with. And I think those industry conversations are so important. I also really I used to, earlier in my career, I used to love going to, any industry events, they have those 2 day events where you learn everything about media or marketing or whatever it is. And you meet lots of like-minded people there that you stay in touch with forever. So for me, that I've loved that. And that was really helpful for me. And yeah, I think as far as embracing equity, it's a job for every single person to do in every organization out there. And I just think educating yourself about things like unconscious bias and things that we really don't understand that well is super important too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so true, because if you look at it, talent is, distributed equally, but opportunity is not, right? So I believe that gender equity needs to be much more than just a slogan for all of us, right? And I think each one of us, we need to do this every single day. And, it's amazing, when, to watch other people blossom because you gave them a little lift. It's fun to see, folks around you grow and flourish in their career professionally or even personally. So, so thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. I do think that the point that you want to pass on that mentorship is definitely a big deal, right? So knowing that you can take what someone taught you and then teach kind of the next generation what you've learned, and then to see how appreciative they are of it is very, very rewarding, and it helps you feel like you're giving back and maybe changing things a little, I think, too. So
gosh, organizations, there's so many. A couple of you mentioned the ones that I'm also loosely engaged with. I would say for me personally, the fourth floor has been a very interesting group to be a part of. It's about educating, female leaders on how to be a part of boards, being exposed to VC opportunities, what's the next great thing to invest in. And I think those type of platforms and organizations are so critical because I think as a female investor society, I think we tend to be, averse to taking on risk and also taking on that kind of opportunity to be more high profile investors. And so that organization is amazing. And then personally for me, I've been proactively on the board of the Financial Communication Society. It's been around for, more than 60 years. And it's a phenomenal organization in terms of it's a not-for-profit. We really focus on presenting diverse marketing or communication leaders, learning from each other. And we also have a great mentorship program that I've actually mentored quite a few different individuals over the last several years. And it's amazing to see their journey and where they've ended up from our first conversation of, I don't know what to say, in this meeting with somebody who's been really tough on me to now driving and running an entire part of a department or organization. So those type of things are just really fulfilling for me personally. And I see a lot of value in that. The other piece that I would mention related to embracing equity, I think it's just critical to look at each other as human beings, regardless of race, creed, culture, background, gender. And I think that's the big thing with equity. It's not about favoring one or the other. I think we should just all be treated equally. And in our more, I would say, leadership role, we have an opportunity to really act on it, right? In terms of the people that we bring onto our team, when we think about pay raises, when we think about, elevating people through the organization, it should be done through an equitable lens and not favoring one way or the other. So I think it behooves us as leaders to continue being cognizant of how are we, really seeing through this kind of platform of equity across the board.
Thank you, Kirti. And behooves, such a brilliant word. I wasn't expecting that this afternoon. Thank you so much. And Jeminah.
I agree with everything that's been spoken about so far, and just building off of what Kirti was speaking around inequality, I think in the theme of equity, what can be really powerful is when you take that equal opportunity approach and then you combine it with the concept, at least how I define and understand equity, I think there was an infographic I saw years ago that really landed the concept for me. And it was an infographic of two kids, same age, one is taller than the other. And the question is, would you give them the same size bike? And of course, the answer is no. They're the same kids, same age, just different height. And what they need are different sized bikes. So when we can combine the equality concept with tools that are personalized for the people that we work with, I think that's where a really powerful combination can come into play. And having mentors internally within organizations, or often I've had a lot of my internal mentors within organizations recommend external programs or resources or podcasts that might be able to help me grow throughout my career. I think all of that is where you really can create a natural and an authentic support system throughout the career journey. When it comes to organizations of different women in revenue or women in executive position or women in management organizations, this is something I'll be really transparent. I've struggled with this throughout my entire career to find organizations that I felt were really aligned to me as an archetype and were giving me a space to show parts of myself that were outside of sort of that more strict professional technical realm. And there are good ones out there. Some of the names have been mentioned here. What I also have found is that they're very expensive to join and to be a part of. And while I felt very honored to be able to be a part of those programs, what it made me realize is there's a big demographic of women who don't have access to that. So I've been doing a lot of research lately around what organizations exist out there that I can start speaking to and supporting to share as more resources to the teams that I lead. Women in Data is one that I came across. That is an organization not specifically for women in revenue, but women who love data, and women in revenue are definitely those women.
Just want to say thank you, all of you, for joining and sharing your personal experiences, professional experiences, and careers today. I think there's a lot of people that can learn from you being in revenue, whether you're a woman or not, anyone who's in middle management looking to take that next step. The groups, the companies that you've all talked about as well, that people can look to follow and join. So really, really appreciate all of you joining today and sharing your story with us, and hope to see you all in person next year for our in-person International Women's Day event.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
guys for coordinating.
Thank you.
It was wonderful meeting everyone.
So much.
Lovely.
It was great